Hey guys, it's Kingdom Orange 2 here, and welcome back to my channel. Usually for these videos, I start out by giving you guys a quick refresher on the fairy tale's plot first. However, since Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is such a long book, I'll just include some similarities and differences to the novel while I explain each entry on my list. Now, like always, if there's any Alices you feel that I have missed, feel free to comment them down below. I tried to only include movies that were based on the first book by Lewis Carroll and not on its sequel Through the Looking Glass, and I also didn't include videos that weren't available to watch in English or had no dialogue. So now, before the Queen of Hearts yells, let's get right to it. Burbank Animation. So this 1988 version of Alice in Wonderland opens with Alice reading from a book called Logical Principles of Calculus, which honestly is a bit strange because why would a 7-year-old be reading a calculus book? And then I remembered that Lewis Carroll was a mathematician, so it kinda makes sense. Kinda. Anyways, when Alice first looks into the doorway, she sees not only a beautiful garden, but a bunch of animals holding a race. A storyline that is a bit redundant, because in this film, the caucus race that the animals hold on the shore to dry themselves off still occurs. Another thing that Burbank Animation changed was in the book, the baby that the Duchess holds turns into a pig once Alice takes it outside to nurse it. But in this movie, the baby is a pig the entire time Alice was in her house. I lastly also thought the ending was pretty cute because after Alice wakes up, she takes a stroll in the garden and finds animals similar to the ones she just dreamed about, like a white rabbit and a grinning cat. Care Bears. In 1987, Nelvana Limited released the third Care Bears movie in the franchise, The Care Bears Adventure in Wonderland. The movie begins with the White Rabbit asking the Care Bears to help him find Alice, the missing Princess of Heart, as she is going to be crowned the Queen of Wonderland. But if they're unable to locate her, the wizard will take over the throne. The Care Bears search all over the world, but are unsuccessful in finding her. However, they do discover a girl named Alice who bears a striking resemblance to the missing princess. The Care Bears decide to take her to Wonderland so that she can act as the princess until the missing one is found. Arriving in Wonderland, the Care Bears split into two, with half of them taking regular Alice to the Queen of Hearts palace, while the other half search for the Mad Hatter, who knows the location of the missing princess. Braveheart's group eventually locate the Mad Hatter, who takes them to the lair of the Jabberwocky, where Princess Alice is found. They rescue her, and after the Care Bears remove a thorn in the Jabberwocky's foot, he graciously brings them back to the Heart Palace. At the same time, regular Alice and the other Care Bears make it to the castle, where they are greeted by the Queen of Hearts. The Queen of Hearts knows deep down that this isn't her daughter, but decides to help them anyways. As the coronation day grows closer, the wizard tries to expose regular Alice by making her take the princess test. After regular Alice climbs a mountain to retrieve water from a spring, the wizard then forces Alice to make the flowers magically bloom. Fortunately for her though, Princess Alice steps in to perform the task, and in a fit of rage, the wizard exposes himself to everyone that he had Alice kidnapped. The movie then ends with the wizard being arrested as Princess Alice is crowned queen, and she helps send regular Alice and the Care Bears back home. Cinematronics. To capitalize off the release of the live-action Alice, in 2010, a studio called Cinematronics created their own version of Alice in Wonderland. Now, this is probably the most bizarre film I've watched, not just for this series of videos, but in my entire life. First of all, the animation is awful. It looks like it was created on Microsoft Paint. There's also the fact that it doesn't have any voice actors. It just uses stolen audio from a 1948 radio play. And let me not forget to mention that in this film, there's a rat that looks like a giant piece of poop. Now, I understand that this movie was created to trick people into purchasing their DVD, but I kind of wish someone on the internet would find out maybe just a bit more information on the thought process behind this film. Because it's so bizarre, I just need to know what the filmmakers were thinking when they created this. Descendants. Now, usually I wouldn't include Descendants in these videos because most of the franchise is live action. However, since their version of Alice in Wonderland only appears in the animated show Wicked World, I decided to cover her. In the short form series, Alice has a teenage daughter named Allie, who not only highly resembles her, but also has the same curious personality. Now, honestly, there really isn't much more to say about Allie, as the show doesn't have any specific storylines that center around her. However, Allie's father does own the Mad for Tea Cafe, where the girls oftentimes hang out at. Disney. In 1951, the Walt Disney Animation Studios created the most famous adaptation of the fairy tale with Alice in Wonderland. So straight off the bat, a lot of characters in this movie were actually taken from the sequel Through the Looking Glass, such as Tweedledee and Tweedledum, the Walrus and the Carpenter, and the Talking Flowers. And to make room for these additions, Disney got rid of a lot of characters from the book, like the Mock Turtle and Griffin, the Duchess, and the Knave of Hearts. Disney also made a few plot changes, with the significant one being that in this movie, Alice's main goal isn't to find the garden that she saw through the doorway, but to follow the White Rabbit instead. Also, in the Disney film, Alice is the one on trial and not the Knave of Hearts. Now, usually in my videos, I like to point out the huge influence Disney has on other adaptations of a fairy tale, but since this novel actually has illustrations in it that Disney based their designs off as well, it's really hard to draw the line as to where exactly the influence stops and starts. However, since this movie has such a legacy, I can't argue that no filmmaker or animator wasn't at least partially inspired by some aspect of this film when creating their adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. Ever After High. While Alice doesn't make an appearance in the Ever After High franchise, the role of Alice is played by her son, Alistair Wonderland. Alistair first appears in the Netflix special Spring Unsprung, where he and Bunny Blanc find the storybook of legends underneath a river in Wonderland. They then try to locate the Well of Wonder to bring the book back to Ever After, but during the process, the Cheshire Cat swaps the storybook with a book of riddles. The duo eventually make it to Ever After High, where they stay until Applewhite and her friends are eventually later able to break the curse the evil queen set on Wonderland, allowing everyone to travel freely between the two worlds. Now, a couple things that are confusing about Alistair is that Alistair claims himself that he is a royal because he wants to one day follow in his mom's footsteps and fall down the rabbit hole like she did. However, he's a teenager and technically lives in Wonderland, so I'm not exactly sure how any of this would work. I don't know why the writers for this series didn't just say he already fulfilled his destiny, sort of like Blondie did, but maybe they didn't really care enough to try and figure this out. Festival of Family Classics. In 1971, Rankin Bass adapted Alice in Wonderland into an episode of Festival of Family Classics. And because this episode is pretty short, even though I would argue this is more of a pacing issue, Festival of Family Classics chops out certain scenes and characters from the story, like the Duchess and the Griffin. Also, in this version of the fairy tale, Alice never plays croquet with the Queen of Hearts. The whole trial scene is actually excluded. Now, the episode ends with the Queen of Hearts' army trying to capture Alice, but she eats a shrinking mushroom and is able to hide from them. Fortunately, though, as she lays on the ground sobbing, Alice eventually wakes up from her dream. Funky Fables. Funky Fables was a segment that aired on the Japanese TV series Hirake Ponkiki. Typically, each episode provides a more humorous take on the fairy tale they cover. One example would be that the Queen's playing cards all speak like Elvis, which honestly is a bit strange to me because this is literally the third episode where I've heard a character sound like Elvis. So I guess it's like a weird running joke the writers put in every episode. Regardless though, Funky Fables' version of Alice in Wonderland is pretty accurate to the original fairy tale, with only the caucus race being a storyline that didn't appear in this episode. However, instead of the Knave of Hearts being put on trial for eating tarts, the trial is about a stolen apple pie, even though nobody actually stole it. This episode also ends with Alice waking up and her sister telling her that she should publish a book about her dream, and the narrator then proceeds to tell the audience that the book ended up becoming its own movie, TV series, and eventually a theme park which Alice called Wonderland. Hanna-Barbera. In 1966, Hanna-Barbera created an hour-long TV special with the longest title ever in history called Alice in Wonderland, or What's a Nice Kid Like You Doing in a Place Like This. In the TV special, Alice is actually working on a book report about Alice's adventures in Wonderland when she falls and hits her head. Her dog Fluff then jumps inside of the TV, and Alice finds herself in Wonderland. Now, the film follows Alice as she tries to find Fluff while meeting many characters from the book, like the Cheshire Cat, the Mad Hatter, and even a caterpillar that is made up of Fred and Barney. Eventually, though, Alice is reunited with her dog, and with the help of the White Rabbit, escapes the Queen of Hearts prison. The movie then ends with Alice waking up from her dream, even though it's strongly hinted that these events may have actually happened, but don't ask me, I never understood the movie Inception. Jetlag Productions. In 1995, my favorite award-winning company, Jetlag Productions, released their movie version of Alice in Wonderland. Now, there's really nothing remarkably different about this Alice in Wonderland other than the fact that it's one of the only films besides Disney which contains a scene of the pigeon mistaking an enlarged Alice for a serpent. In fact, it's even more accurate to the book than Disney's because unlike Disney, which has Alice's entire body grow, this movie only has Alice's neck grow taller. Also, because I guess the animators think that smoking hookah is too inappropriate for children, in this movie, the caterpillar sips out of a bendy straw. Yeah, overall, this was a pretty uninspiring version of the fairy tale, but I do appreciate how similar it is to the novel, except the fact that they cut out the scenes with the Duchess. Manga fairy tales of the world. Straight off the bat, the one thing I found crazy about this adaptation of Alice in Wonderland was that they completely excluded the Cheshire Cat. I thought for a second he would appear at the trial for the Knave of Hearts, especially since in this version of the story, the Queen has some of the characters Alice met along the way serve as witnesses, but no, he's never in the show. I just find this really strange, especially since he's probably one of the most popular characters from the book. Regardless though, another important difference in this episode is that the garden Alice is looking for in the doorway doesn't belong to the Queen of Hearts, but is actually where she ends up meeting with the caterpillar. Regal Academy. Alice makes her first and only appearance in the season 2 episode titled Rose in Wonderland. In this series, Flawless Snow White tells Rose and her team that Alice has a key that can take them to the Snow Queen's castle so that they can go and rescue their families. When Rose and her friends finally make it to Wonderland, the Cheshire Cat informs them that Alice is in prison at the Queen of Hearts castle and that he will take them there to rescue her. However, when they finally arrive at the palace, they find out it was a trap, and the Queen of Hearts forces them to play a game of football. At the same time, Rose's pom-poms are able to free Alice from her vine prison, and before the game is over, Rose and her team drive Alice away in a pumpkin car. Eventually though, the Queen of Hearts army once again corners all of them, but Alice is finally able to locate the right key, and Rose and her team use a portal in the forest where they ultimately arrive in the Snow Queen's kingdom. Rembrandt Films. So in 1966, a Czechoslovakian company known as Rembrandt Films created the movie Alice in Wonderland in Paris. Now, this film is a bit unique from others in this video because it takes place after Alice went to Wonderland. The movie opens with Alice daydreaming of wanting to go to Paris to meet Madeline. Yes, Madeline, the redheaded girl who hangs with those nuns. Well, apparently, Rembrandt Films created a couple of shorts based on Madeline in the 1960s, so that's how they had the rights to the character. Anyways, a talking mouse named Francois appears in Alice's room and tells Alice that he can take her to Paris. Francois then has Alice eat a piece of cheese that uses the same magical mushroom in its ingredients as the one she ate in Wonderland, and when Alice takes a bite of the cheese, she shrinks down to the size of a mouse. The rest of the film is literally Francois showing Alice around Paris while he narrates 5 stories, 2 of which come from Madeline's book series. After the last story though, Alice and Francois see Madeline reading Alice in Wonderland, and Alice is able to grow back to her normal size and finally meet her. However, in the end, Alice flies away and it turns out that this entire adventure was just a dream. Alright, so last on the list is Video Brinquedo. So similar to Cinematronics in 2011, Video Brinquedo also tried to piggyback off the success of the live-action Disney movie with their version of Alice in Wonderland. Now, one thing I noticed right away while watching this film was that a lot of character designs are ripped straight from Disney, such as Tweedledee and Tweedledum and the Mad Hatter. However, typical for Video Brinquedo, this movie has a very random plot with Alice arriving in Wonderland and being constantly warned that the Queen of Hearts will imprison her because she really hates foreigners. Eventually though, the Queen's card soldiers catch up with Alice and bring her to the castle, where the Queen sentences her to the guillotine, but of course Alice wakes up before she is harmed. The last thing I want to point out is that this movie tries this really lame attempt at humor by having Alice run into the Frog Prince, but she refuses to kiss him and is just like, wrong fairy tale, dude. Like, seriously, what was the purpose of that? So now it's time for the rankings. Number 14 is Cinematronics. The Alice in this movie is truly the stuff of nightmares. This is not just the worst Alice on this list, but probably also the worst fairy tale character I have ever ranked in any of my comparison videos. Honestly, everyone who worked on this movie needs to be psychologically evaluated. Number 13 is Video Brinquedo. For once, Video Brinquedo isn't the worst on my list. Now, to be fair, this isn't even the worst Video Brinquedo character design, but I still found their Alice to be whiny and ugly looking. Number 12 is Rembrandt Films. I'm all for a unique take on fairy tale characters, but I don't really think mixing Madeline and Alice together was that interesting, especially since I never really grew up watching the Madeline TV series or movie. Also, I can't relate to Alice's fascination with going to Paris because I've been there and it wasn't one of my favorite cities. Now, if Alice wanted to go to Amsterdam, that would have been an entirely different story. Number 11 is Ever After High. It's really a shame because Alistair has such a gorgeous face, but his design and personality are about as interesting as Wonder Bread. It's such a pity because Alice is such a great character and Alistair isn't. Also, did I mention that I absolutely hate him in Bunny Blanc? She's probably my least favorite Ever After High character of all time. I'm really such a hater. Number 10 is Manga Fairy Tales of the World. The only thing that stands out about this Alice is the dress she wears, because other than that, she's pretty forgettable. Number 9 is Festival of Family Classics. The Alice in this TV series looks almost like another famous young girl who may or may not have crashed her house on a wicked witch, if you're catching my drift. Would you guys actually throw tomatoes at me if I told you I prefer Dorothy over Alice, though? Number 8 is Burbank Animation. I have nothing bad to say about this Alice, but honestly, I really don't have anything good to say about this Alice either. Other than that, the little red details they added to her dress are cute. She probably needs to buy books that are more age appropriate though. Number 7 is Jetlag Productions. I sort of have the same issue here with the Burbank Animation Alice. I don't really have anything good or bad to say about this Alice, but I did really enjoy her design. I also believe this movie aged her up a bit from a 7-year-old to like a 12-year-old, which was actually a pretty smart decision from the writers in my opinion. Number 6 is Regal Academy. This Alice has such a cute design and I love that they made her a teenager, but I can't rank her higher for 2 reasons. First is that we know next to nothing about her character in the show because Alice only appears for 1 episode. And second, the hair color the designers gave her is absolutely atrocious. It's such a hideous shade of orange that it actually kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. Number 5 is Funky Fables. I won't argue and say that there aren't Alices on this list with much better designs. However, I ranked this Alice higher because I not only thought she was probably the smartest Alice on this list, but I also really appreciated her self-deprecating humor. Like girl, I am also worried about the cake I ate growing straight to my hips. Number 4 is Hanna-Barbera. I'm such a huge fan of 1960s mod fashion, so I love that the animators incorporated the style of the time into Alice's design. This Alice also has a really lovely singing voice, which is always a huge plus in my eyes. Additionally, I love how Alice's main conflict in this movie is to find the location of her dog, because honestly, I never really understood why Alice wanted to find that garden so badly, but maybe I missed something while reading. Number 3 is Care Bears. So I can't really tell if I think the idea of Alice being the daughter of the Queen of Hearts is a stupid one. However, I love princesses, so of course I love the thought of Alice wearing a princess dress and having a little heart crown. Now honestly, I would have preferred the regular Alice to end up being the princess herself, but maybe under some sort of identity spell. However, I guess that might be asking too much from a movie written about the Care Bears. Number 2 is Descendants. I'm not going to sit here and say that Allie isn't just a carbon copy of her mother. However, I don't really care. I think the designers did such a great job with remixing Alice's original outfit, and I love how unintentionally hilarious Allie can be at times. It's also nice to see maybe what Alice would have been like if we ever saw her as a teenager. Number 1 is Disney. First of all, Disney's design for Alice is simply beautiful. The animators did such an amazing job interpreting John Tenniel's illustrations from the original novel. I also think Catherine Beaumont did a wonderful job providing the voice for Alice in both her speaking and singing roles. My only question though is, why did Disney never adapt the second book? Because I honestly would argue it's better than the first one was. If you liked this video today and want to see more content in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will see you soon. Bye!